Hi, I'm going to share with you my experience with the Fuji 50-140 2.8, coming from a real-world working photographer's perspective, shooting with this lens commercially for the last 3 years. Dude, did you know you can save money on a gym membership by just buying this lens instead? Talk about a twofer. No, but in all seriousness, this lens is huge. And at almost 3 pounds, it's noticeable. It's clunky, it's slow, but I mean, it's sharp, it looks cool, and it's got phenomenal image stabilization. For a telephoto, this lens really is as good as it gets. I bought this lens originally because I had no way of shooting with more compression than the 50mm I had at the time, and I didn't want to splurge on a macro thinking all it did was one thing. I was wrong. I love that lens. It's my most used lens. Go check out that video. But the versatility of this 50-140 is nothing to overlook. It's the only 70-200 2.8 equivalent, and I think that's critical for anyone coming to Fuji and wanting to have that trinity of lenses that really covers all your bases. The lens hood here has a nifty little door that you can pop off just to adjust your circular polarizer or gradated filter, whatever you're using, all without removing the hood. Kind of nifty. The ring itself is 72mm, so it might be compatible with some of your other lenses if you're switching over from Canon or Nikon. It is plastic, however, not metal, the lens hood. The rest of it, however, is very premium, anodized aluminum finish. It really does feel as good as it looks. I have the same gripe as I've said with my other Fuji lens reviews, however. I love the clicky nature of the aperture ring, but I just wish it could lock into place once I've set my aperture, because it's really not uncommon for me to knock it out of place if I'm shooting handheld. And though most of my work is shot on a tripod, I find every time I'm shooting without a tripod, it's with this lens. It does have a collar here that helps even out the weight if you're using on a tripod, or it's just a great handle if you're walking around. I might just be a little bit too used to the macro over here, but I do think that the minimum focusing distance on this is pretty ridiculous. It's like a meter. It shouldn't hinder you from using this lens unless you're exclusively working in tight spaces, but I know every time I'm asked to shoot something outside, however, I always make sure to leave enough room in my bag so that I can carry this 50-140. It's not something I use a lot in my kit, but I definitely jump to it every opportunity that I can. You might be realizing a theme here. If you've seen some of my other lens reviews, I don't really go for generalist lenses. I do typically prefer primes, but I kind of treat this telephoto as a prime because I pretty much only shoot it at 140. I just break it out when I want that compression. Now, it's totally personal preference, but I do like imagining my shots at a specific focal length. And when it comes time to recreate them, I just break out the closest tool I have to the idea I had. So for example, if you pick up your first nifty 50 and shoot exclusively at 50mm for a period of time, you'll start to develop an eye for what 50mm looks like as you're walking around. Same goes with any other focal length. The more you get to understand the different nuances from 35 to 50 or 85, 135, 300, whatever, the more you can use those tools for that specific task that you're trying to achieve. Now let's talk autofocus. It is all internal, so that's a good thing. Nothing is moving on the outside, so that's also great for dust and weatherproofing. I did do a tiny bit of research just to find out that it's got 23 elements and 16 groups. Now that's a fuck ton of gaps for fog and fungi to show up. So be sure you keep this in a dry environment and don't forget it in your car or something. If you're picking up this lens used, do a couple shots and aim them directly at the sun or the light. Look for any excessive flaring. Might be what you're looking for, but probably not. So just be careful with this behemoth. Anyway, the autofocus. It is fast, in good light. Definitely don't push it in dim conditions though, like concert photography or any fast-moving subject in low light. Luckily, in the product world, my subjects don't really move at all, so I'm lucky enough to take my time. Time, however, you do need if you're thinking of using the manual focus on this lens. I know you can fiddle with your menus to have the MF override the AF, but if you've ever used like a regular DSLR focusing ring, you'll know it's pretty weird because this ring's connected to a computer that tells the camera to adjust the focus. There's like a disconnect that's kind of hard to describe, but you feel it as soon as you take around with it. If you're liking this video so far, by the way, please consider giving it a like, subscribe to help support the channel. If you stick around till the end, I've got a whole bunch of examples with this lens coming up. Now what about optical quality? What every photographer likes to say, the sharpness, as if that makes any difference. But the lens is a 12 out of 10. Wide open, there's no light fall off or vignetting, there's no color fringing whatsoever. And it's sharp all the way down to f/22. If you're having issues with your photo, it's not this lens. Just to reiterate from my 80mm macro video, Fuji is at the forefront of optics technology and many other fields than just cameras, like military and space operations, but even for Hollywood productions with optics that cost more than my yearly take-home. They know what they're doing with lenses, and they've put some of that know-how into these more consumer-grade products for us. You can trust that this lens is as sharp as you need it to be, and it's not going to be the limiting factor in your shot. I alluded to this earlier, but the image stabilization is surprising. It's quite incredible, really. I used to always follow a rule of thumb to double my shutter speed from the focal length when hand-holding, so setting 1/25 of a second for a 50mm lens is very suitable, but even at 140, I can comfortably get super sharp images at 1/15 of a second. I know that this rule of thumb is for lenses without IS, but it's still cool looking at the viewfinder and seeing it in real time, slowing your movements as if your hand was really as steady as you think it is. I read that Fuji had designed stabilized binoculars for NASA, and this lens is really working some kind of that wizardry. I will pull up a couple images here on my computer, and we'll go over them with you here. So first here we've got a recent image here. Great example of showing some depth, some foreground, middle ground, there's some background, but the subjects aren't really lost in that big warehouse. The focus is on the people and their work, not the warehouse, so that was my intention. That's why it looks like that. Next, we've got some indoor portraits here. They're shot against my super tiny little sky background. It's only like 2 feet wide. But I was able to place it behind the subjects and basically make it look like this straight out of camera because of that compression from this lens. It really helps you focus and narrow in on a subject. Next, we've got some more compression examples, just kind of bringing all these products together. Same here in this image, there's a lot of flags and reflectors in these images that helped kind of create this perfect seamless white background with no spill on the subjects. And shooting at 140 just helped eliminate all of that clutter that's going on in the image, and I can have a higher resolution final image of the products. Next, here's an example of focusing on some fast moving subjects in low light. This is a shot from Cancer Bats when they were in town. And here from side stage, you can kind of see that compression from the guy behind him to him and the person in front of him, just kind of bringing the whole band closer together. Here, just a good example of some colors and some contrast. It's a long exposure, but this one was on a tripod, it wasn't handheld. Here too, of course, this is, it's pretty slow pace, but focusing at night for long exposures, this lens handles, ghosting and flaring really well. There's a lot of contrast in this image, and I think it handled it really well. It does a good job. This one here is handheld. This was for a sign company, and just a good way to show some scale in these signs. I like having a person walking through the image to kind of convey that motion. I just slow down the shutter speed, and I'm able to do this handheld because of the image stabilization that this lens allows me to have. This one too is also handheld. It's my buddy Jacob doing a nose mani, just kind of doing like a shutter drag across the frame. Here as well. This one's so my buddy Josh here is doing a nose grind, skating towards the camera. It's usually kind of tough for lenses to focus when the subject is coming towards the camera. But in this case, it's kind of pre-focused to where I knew the trick was going to be, and I'm just waiting for him to come into the frame and snap the image. But still, I think it's shot at like f/16, middle of the day, super sharp, love it. If you're switching over to Fuji, or if you're in the market for the best telephoto lens on the market, for your X-body Fuji camera, this is the lens you need. It feels pro in the hands, it'll take anything you throw at it, and it'll only leave you with killer results. It's the only of its class at 2.8, and I would say essential for any fast-paced shooter, outdoor enthusiast, or portrait photographer who is looking for that high-quality compression. Let me know down in the comments if you're thinking of picking up this lens, what kind of images do you shoot, and thanks a bunch for watching. If you've learned anything new in this video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It really helps out a lot. And I'll catch you all on the next one. Peace.